Yeah.
I'll quickly go through how the thing works and whatever. That shouldn't take very long, and maybe we'll just have a discussion on best practices, because I'd like to learn as much, from you guys. So this is a counting instrument. So the air flows through the cell, and whenever alpha decays, it hits the side of the instrument, makes a flash of light, and that is one count on the counter. And when you have the beeps on the app, it will hear a beep every time one of those events happens. So right now, you hardly hear beeps at all. Like every once in a while, every few minutes or something like that, you'll hear one beep, and that's a count. On the device itself, there are two settings for a short setting and a long setting. The short will look at the data for the last 15 seconds, and the long will look at the data for the last 5 minutes. And on the app, you have more selection than that. One count in 15 seconds with a clean cell means you have around 7 picocuries per liter. So your 15-second average in clean air will either be reading 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That means it hasn't seen any counts in the last 15 seconds. Or you'll get like a 7 or a 14 or something like that. It's like very granular. Come on in.
Just the one about the sniffer?
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. So like this would be the data for today. So the graph shows a bunch of zeros and a whole bunch of 7s and a whole bunch of 15s and a whole bunch of so for low levels in here, the 15-second average is useless. It will just bounce around too much, right?
So,
Go ahead.
if I can understand, so if the house, let's just say, is right around 4, and you're doing the 15-second, is it pretty much just gonna show 0, or it'll bounce between 0 and 7?
In the 15
Yeah,
second
15
one,
second
yeah,
after a while,
it'll do like a bunch of zeros. It might get a 7.
Oh, so it'll do some zeros, 7s, zeros, 7.
That's right. So
Okay,
yeah, if you want to have a look at, so those are all like that's what
okay.
I spread it out. So most of the readings in the 15-second reading today would have been zeros and then a bunch of higher ones.
Okay.
Hey, Michael.
So yeah, it's pretty useless to try and measure low levels at the 15-second. I'm going to go and change that to about, I can change it, like if I increase my integration time, it becomes a whole lot smoother. And so here, that number is 0.9. So today, the average in the building was around 0.9 picocuries per liter. So by changing how long I count, I increase my accuracy. The idea of a sniffer, though, is to find hot spots rather than
So each, on that increased time span, each one of those data points is actually a combination of a bunch of those data points from the shorter mode, right?
Yeah, like it'll look back at the data. So it might have gotten 30 counts in the half an hour, and then it averages from that, right? And your 30 counts might only fluctuate by plus or minus 5, so it's a fairly stable reading when you go along. So again, it's the counting statistics means you got to go slow when you're. I mean, you got to integrate for a long time in low levels, but you mainly use this thing for finding sources, and that's where your 15-second counts come in handy. So I'm gonna take this out. Got some radon in here, and you'll just have to trust me, I guess, to read the numbers. So sniff level right now shows 0. And you can hear the beeps like once every minute or so.
You brought a box of radon with you?
You're saying that's the source?
All right.
That's the source right there?
That's my radon chamber, yeah. I've got a radium dial watch in here, so this is gonna be fairly hot.
But you can still go through airport security because it's a watch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think
So
we
I
have-
carry it in my coat, so they never bother me. They don't x-ray it, or they don't check it for radiation. So anyway, you can hear the beeps. The sniff is now at 677.
Wow.
751,
Wow.
And you're gonna wear that watch?
800,
When I
850,
was 14, I had my own watch.
still 800. So it leveled out at 800. So we know that's kind of where it's at. Got to 1,000. So it still bounces around, but you know, hey, this is you're definitely the source here. Now you don't want to be in here forever in a day because that puts radon decay products will plate out on the side here, and they don't get flushed out.
Hence,
So
it's still going like crazy,
it's still going like crazy. It's still beeping like crazy,
but the reading is low.
but the readings will hopefully go down pretty quick. So it'll still take time to flush out. But it's really coming down fast right now. It's down to 500. Got up to 1,200 or whatever. So in 90 seconds or something like that, it'll be running around with, we say it corrects between 90 and 95% of the highest exposure that you had. So I was running at, let's say, 1,200 or so. So I'm expecting that'll settle down to around 100 picocuries liters, and there will be some bounce after. So after I've exposed this to a hot source, I can't go and measure the regular air around here again, but I can go to the next source, right?
Yeah, because it's so sensitive, like it's still kind of picking up that previous stuff, and it's kind of,
It's picking up the stuff that's stuck to the outside here,
yeah.
but it's got math inside the unit that subtracts that, right? So that gives us our fast recovery.
No.
So we're down to, it was 100 just now, and now it's at 35 in the reading, and we had, 1,200 before, so we had a good fast recovery. So I could go and measure this again, and again see the 1,200. I won't be able to get a good reading in this room right now, because, the correction for the stuff that's stuck on the side of the wall here is all done in math. It works okay, but it's not perfect. So you get better readings with a clean cell in low air, but the recovery is fast enough so you can go from hole to hole in your floor.
Does that have an air pump in it?
Yeah, yeah. It pumps it around a little more than ½ a liter a minute.
Yeah, because my Johnson sniffer, when they do it, you get 1,000 picocuries, you have to like set it outside for 15 minutes and suck fresh air through it to get it to go down.
Yeah, yeah.
To a reasonable level again.
So we still have a radon project plated out, but the math kind of helps us to compensate for it.
What's the reading now?
It's reading on 0. But it'll bounce back up, like there'll be more,
And that has a filter in it, in line?
this is the opening line filter here.
And how often do you change that?
Don't.
You don't?
You can't see.
So
Well, I just, know, because we have them, I didn't know if we ever needed to change them.
So, you look in here and see if it's gray and dusty and stuff like that. The idea is that, well, you don't want the gum to go all the way through it in yourself. So if you see this is gray and dusty, pull the end off of it and put a cotton ball in there. Like this is it's a piece of Hammond furnace filter that we have in there, but you can replace that with a cotton ball or whatever, just to get the, so your cement dust doesn't get in there.
I thought you had a desiccant in there.
Okay,
it's
so
just-
this is just a piece of furnace filter. This stuff here is inside of a diaper ripped up,
Oh.
right? You know, diapers, when you get liquid in them, they gel up.
Yes.
And so the idea is if you end up dropping, so the idea is one, it'll take out actual liquid droplets and stuff like that if you were in a really, really condensing environment, it'll take out the liquid droplets. Or if you want to drop that in a puddle, the idea is that this would gel up and not suck water into the cell itself. So if this actually gets dirty and whatever, you can get a diaper, rip it up, or we can sell you a new tube for $20. We try and keep the maintenance costs low on these, so we don't prescribe a calibration interval or whatever. You know, there's nothing really to tune on these things, so and they're not used for real estate transactions, anything legal. So you know, as long as they're working for you, keep using them. You don't need to send them in once a year for calibration or anything like that. I don't know if everybody can see that. Get out of here. So I guess the bottom line here was my reading at all day long.
So upstairs you said had a 0.9
Average, yeah.
average. So this is down in the basement in theory at least.
So, you know, I'll just send the phone around, but what I'm trying to show is that, you know, this line down here, that's what we had all this time. Then we had a really big spike of exposure just now, and then it recovered to quite close to the zero, but there's a little bit more of an oscillation around the zero after the exposure. Just send it around, have a look at that.
I use mine on my iPad. I like it on the iPad, it's a little bigger, you can see it.
Yeah,
I think like you said, if you walk away from it too far, there's that connection to the iPad, you can just leave next to it for the day. Versus your phone where you may walk away, go make a phone call or something.
Is that using plug-in or is it battery powered? Is it rechargeable battery?
it's rechargeable, so it has a USB connector right here.
And it lasts forever.
Yeah, you pull the charger, they'll last.
I haven't charged mine in months.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Well, and it's got a battery in.
You don't run it all day long.
No, I don't run it. I mean, you use it maybe for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you do a lot, so what we'd like to say is turn it on in the morning and keep it on until you've done all your measurements, because if you do shut it off, the math breaks, right? The background subtraction doesn't work anymore.
Very,
Yes.
Again, I need to run, but just one quick question. So let's just say that there's a pipe penetration somewhere along these 20 feet,
Yeah.
and I need to kind of sniff it to find out where it is. You know, there's a hot spot.
Right.
If I'm on the 15-second, would I actually just slowly move it, or would I actually want to just put it 15 seconds in one place, move it a little bit, 15 seconds in the next place? Would you actually proactively move it, or?
I would test where you think stuff might be coming out, right? So you do want to be in the airstream. Bill, yesterday, he said like, it's really not, like you can't just go in the general air here, read here, and in the general air there, read over here, and see something different, because you know there's so much of air mixing in your basement, and the levels are so low, right? So to be able to see that on the 15-second, you got to be in the source. Right? When you're in the source, you know you test a crack, you test a specific source. I think.
Yeah. But when you're testing it, do you want to hold it for a period of time there?
I would hold it for a period of time, 15 to 90 seconds, and go over to the next one.
you gotta fill the cell, so the flow is about half a liter per minute.
Yeah,
The cell's about a half a liter,
yeah, it's about a third of a liter and
third of a liter.
Yeah,
so.
you got 15 seconds or so it fills.
Yeah, so you got a minute there with your, just the air change within the cell itself.
Hey, you basically wanna, as it's counting up, you wanna wait till that count kind of stabilizes, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're reading, yeah, it's still going up, you're.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
don't
if
wanna
it
move
suddenly
on to something
spikes
else.
really high, if it
Yeah.
spikes really high, you're gonna be like, oh, we know that's.
Oh, yeah, if you wanna get away from it, so you can
If
go
you're like,
somewhere else.
"Oh, let's see how high it goes, then
Yeah.
you're not gonna be able to read anything else for a while.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we use them all the time, and you put it in the hole, you drill your hole, you put it in it, and it takes 15, 20, 25 seconds before it starts reading. And it will continue like it did with his to go up over a period of time. So part of what I'm looking at, I don't necessarily even care what the top line number is. I'm not doing it quantitative as much as qualitatively, comparing different things. But once you've used it a bunch, when it hits that first number and all of a sudden it's jumping 200 or 300 picocuries at a time, it goes 300, 600, 900, 1200, 1500, 1800, you're like, okay, it's screaming hot. And then other times it's like 20, 30, 35, 50, 45, and you're like, okay, that's not as hot, right? And so you'll go, and every 3 seconds that number will change. So it takes 30 seconds for it to kind of, start to go, and then part of it is how quickly is it climbing. And if it's not hot, it'll equalize really quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, now, I have a Johnson sniffer when I do, usually I take either 3 or 4 minute, 1 minute readings at each spot. But do I do the same with this, or do I just kind of leave it in there and let it count until it kind of equalizes?
Count until it equalizes. Like, you've got, the cell basically flushed out once in 15 seconds or so.
Yeah.
So I think, you see the 15 seconds, you get about half of where it's finally gonna plateau in your first 15 seconds, right? 15 seconds when I did it here, it was about 600, and when it finally went to 1,000, 1,200.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do a 15
So-
second snip. I'd
so
probably
Henry,
do more
what I
than a
do-
minute or two,
I drill a hole, I got my shop vac,
Yeah.
drill my first test hole, I put it in it, I go to my next place where I'm gonna drill my next test hole, I drill my next test hole, I got my little shop vac, I put my micro in, I go, okay, I'm at neutral, I go back, look at it,
Yeah.
pick it up, go set it next to my second one, go drill my third hole, come
Well, it's
back to
counting
it,
down.
it's clear, and then I put it in my second hole.
Just don't put your shot back on the hole before you take the
So
snip.
I get a little walkie shop vac that's just to pick up the dust, I'm not
Yeah.
using a big old shop vac.
Yeah.
I mean, all I'm doing is picking it up, I don't wanna put the dust, in
Yeah.
it. And that's about, it about works like that. Do it, by the time you've drilled it, you're equalized, you take it, go drill a hole, it's zeroed, you put it in. So you're drilling 4 or 5 holes, you're 10 minutes into characterizing the basement with 4 or 5 holes.
For lower levels, then you need to let it run longer to try and quantify, but then the slider on it allows you to vary the average from 15 seconds to 30 to 60, so that's really handy to kind of smooth out, oh, all right, we plateaued, okay, now we can move over, I wanna know what's in the crawl space, oh, how much is in this pipe over here, but for high level, then you're just, number one, you don't wanna saturate the cell with background, so that's the benefit, is being able to get something really quick in 15 seconds.
Is
Same
it
Yeah.
the point, because if you sat there, then you're kind of getting the high numbers all day long after
Yeah,
that.
you're not gonna read the crawl
It
space.
zeroes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It really does.
It does.
And I've done, I've got one that's 3,000, bouncing around 3,000. I don't want it to settle on a number. I'm like, okay, it's bouncing between 2,500 and 3,000.
Right.
Pull it out, go over, and I'm getting one that's 10. I'm like, my God, that's stupid low. Come back over, it's 3,000 again. Go over there, okay, I'm gonna drill another hole a foot away from it, and make sure, how is it possible it's that low?
Yeah.
And verify. But it is extremely replicable,
Yeah.
hole to hole. Extremely consistent.
I literally had a residential basement that tested sub-slab, 5 picocuries in one corner, 10 in another, and 1,800 in the 2 front corners. I mean, it was like, how can you be that different? 15 or 20 feet away, but it was.
Well, just the way I explained it to people on that is, if this was a gold mining claim, you're not gonna have a matrix of gold nuggets.
We know where to put the
That's-
suction for.
Your next door neighbor can strike a rich, you don't get anything, you're here, you can pan all day, you walk away, someone comes up and picks up a pan there and they strike a rich. Nature is not homogeneous. So-
Bill, you've been using this, I know, for at least over a year, or 2 years. I know you had it at the last symposium you were showing.
Well, no, I didn't own it, they've been on loan for me to do my research. So I haven't, and because I don't have the construction company anymore, I didn't get much chance to use it out in the field. We did use it in one house to try and quantify radon concentrations on the floor. And we got the same thing, variation 250 here, 5,000 picocuries underneath here, and 4,000.
So my question was, did you do like multiple readings at each spot, or you just kind of do one reading at each spot? That's what I'm thinking.
No, we tried to go back and do a couple reads. The issue was, and I was still working out how to do the thoron measurements. Because when you're doing sub-slab, this is where the new thoron function is helpful, because if you're reading regular air, crawl space, and thoron, it's not an issue. But if you're doing sub-slab, in our New Jersey work, we were measuring the thoron in the stacks of radon systems. And some of the houses were 90% thoron and only 10% radon.
Does this discriminate between the thoron and the radon?
It doesn't, it has a sequence, it'll tell you, okay, put it in the source, it'll fill it for 90 seconds, and it'll stop pumping, and it'll see, do my counts go up? That means you're measuring radon, or do my counts go down over the next 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
If I have a questionable reading, I
That's
can go to
thoron.
that function. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
then it does a mathematical regression and give you a percentage between the two.
That's not with the sniffer I have now, the only way you know is, when you get your reading, how quickly it corrects it
Right.
back to a lower number. It tells
Yeah,
you
but
which
it's-
one it is, but that's kind of a pain to interpret.
Right, and some of that's because you're flushing the cell out.
Yeah, right, I know, so it's kind of hard to interpret what you're looking at. So
Yeah.
I like that, it has an actual feature, you can switch over to that mode and discriminate, so, yeah.
Yeah, the key is that if you're doing post-mitigation testing and you vacuum under the floor, you have to be careful on the timing. Because what you're doing is filling the cell for 90 seconds, and then you need to immediately disconnect, okay? So the suction on the floor doesn't back suck fresh air through the chamber, okay? If you're trying to actually measure what's under the floor, and then let it sit for the 300 seconds without any change, any flushing out of the cell, so that the algorithm can see the loss of thoron in that chamber, and then it gives you both readings. You get thoron and radon at the same time.
Yeah, I think, we measured with the micro, and I think it's about 20 thousandths of the suction in is about 20 thousandths on that. So if you have more than 20 thousandths under the slab, it's gonna have a hard time sucking
No,
air.
that's not true. We just measured it with his gauge, and we got 9 inches of vacuum.
On the tip?
Yeah, we got 9 inches of vacuum. We measured it just we
When did you
measured
do
it
that?
like 2 hours
I've
ago.
measured it a couple times. I swear I only get 20 thousandths.
Come see me upstairs.
Okay, yeah,
after-
I wanna come see,
Because, yeah.
because I was worried about that.
And
No.
maybe
And
results from
I-
the.
No, it could be that's why I was asking about the filter. Is the desiccant in it is saturated and it's clogged, and so I'm not getting the flow? The whole question was related to
Okay,
that.
yeah.
No, the pump's pretty strong, and it pulls about half a liter per minute, I think, what I measured.
9
something
inches.
like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I was.
I'll try that again.
It was
So,
not-
but yeah, like, some of the early ones, like, we did have a problem getting making the seal of the cell to the body. So, you might have, maybe it's from the leak.
Yeah, I mean, it could
Or
be one
maybe
of our
a
early
pump went
ones.
out, like, if you still hear pumping?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've had them a long time,
Yeah.
so now we have, 5 of them.
Right,
So it might be the early one, because that's the one I carry in my vehicle,
Right.
because it's the oldest
well,
one.
they're all good, like,
Oh, yeah.
like you and Abe got about the same time, like, I think you were my second customer, or he's got a second customer after Scott, but, yeah, so they've been around since then, but yeah, so you hear the pump going now, and also if you put your finger over it, you hear a little bit of.
Some people can hear it.
Some people, I'm hearing it whether it's on or off.
The buzzing is the same.
It is, and that changed.
So anyhow, like, we don't send them out unless they're over 20,000 Pascal,
Okay,
which is like 8 inches.
all right, I'm gonna pull out my main healer gauge when I get home.
So some of these early ones, yeah, they were little bit less, but they you should still be sucking, right? I mean, so yeah, come upstairs and we'll check that and
I wish
listen
I had
to it,
it.
and whatever. And yeah, what you can check. So yeah, to answer, like, Bruno was asking, if you can just walk around, and it said no, but like, people have, a guy in Germany, he puts a blower, a fan door in, he pressurizes the house to -30, -50 Pascal, and then you can actually go and just
Get sources.
get your sources and under the baseboard and stuff like that, because you're just putting that source on steroids, and that, you know, now you have a source that's strong enough so that you can actually see it without, you know, without being in a hole.
I'll buy a blower door.
Well, and one of the toughest ones is those adjoining slabs,
Yeah.
where you think there might be radon coming, and you just trying to find the flow on that, and you find the source, it's tough, and we're there in the middle of the day, it might be 80 degrees outside, you know, there's no stack effect, and maybe, you know, that night there'll be stack effect, and they'll get some flow coming out from underneath that, so.
You got the house with block walls that's got termite holes in it and stuff everywhere, and that would be good, the 30 Pascal, I like that.
Yeah.
It's nice if you have a finished basement, finished whatever, you don't have to deal with it.
You don't have to get a full, you could make your own kind of blower door, just something that goes over the window, over the basement door that just sucks enough air out of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the air handlers are already getting 4 or 5 Pascals.
Yeah.
And they got the floor pan return ducts and.
Right,
all
and the
that.
mitigators
All
don't
the
check,
times in
and
the
I
basement.
always check on that, I'm like, oh, you got a problem house, let's check whether the basement's being depressurized by the furnace. Yeah.
So, yeah, Matt mentioned before that, you know, just because this is reading a high concentration doesn't necessarily mean you have a huge source coming out, right? Your source term coming out is the concentration times the airflow. So keep that in mind when you're interpreting your readings. One thing, if you put it on your slab and you don't, you know, jam it in the hole and seal it, then it actually gives you a good source term reading, because it'll dilute whatever's coming out by that 0.6 liters per minute. So the actual reading, the concentration reading you get that way, corresponds fairly well to a absolute source term reading in, you know, picocures per minute rather than per liter. So I suggest don't jam it in, because then you're just sucking what's underneath the slab. It might be a high concentration, but it's not, if it's not coming out fast under natural ventilation, it's not going to contribute much to your source. So if you don't jam it in, you're kind of beating that. If you have it loose in there, then if you get a high reading, that usually means also that you've got a high source, not just a high concentration. I think we're going to get kicked out of here. I got a 5-minute warning about 5 minutes ago.
Did you say it was canceled?
The 45 was canceled.
Not to the listener.
I don't think there's anybody lined up. So I guess maybe we'll just keep talking. If we
Yeah,
unless we
keep
get
talking
real
until
to
somebody-
who did it? It's actually lined up, so
Keep talking until somebody shows.
yeah.
That's the bar.
So Abe, do you wanna share any tricks of the trade? Because you're one of the ones that got the very first ones.
Well, tell us how you use it for your radon mitigation.
Typically what we do is when we come out, we'll do the PFE. And then if we don't have, if the aggregate underneath the house is not either washed on, or if there's like a thickened footer and we're missing part of the house, then what we'll do is we'll chart the house out and then go and chart all the holes that we drill. And then we'll go around and use the sniffer to figure out where the source is. I found that I typically put it 1.5 minutes per hole.
So you've drilled holes in the corners of the basement or the
Yeah.
whatever's in contact, and then you measure each one to see which one has the highest concentration? And is there times where you say, oh, we don't need a radon system here, but we do need it over here, or are you just trying to pick out the highest one?
No, typically, like, I found that typically about a 200 underneath the slab is equivalent to about a 490 in air, is at least what we found. So normally, if it's not like a 200, I'm not too concerned about it.
So anything under 200 is kind of, maybe it won't make a difference.
Correct.
Okay.
And if I can't find the source, I'll start looking like dock walls, adjoining garages on the main levels. different
You always
sources
find it
of it.
higher in the center of the slab more than the edges, just because there's no way for the radon to be released in the
No.
center versus the edges, or?
Yeah, normally I never hit the middle, I always hit
It's
the
on
edges.
anyway.
Yeah. It's very rare. Normally if I hit the middle, it's because if we have a house, let's say it's on gravel, and there's expansion joints are behind the walls that aren't sealed, and we lose a lot of pressure along the perimeter, and we can only seal the unfinished side,
Right,
then I may go somewhere in the middle to pull everything back toward the center versus.
for your suction point.
Correct.
Yeah.
I will say that in winter, when the furnace is running, I almost always find the highest level in the mechanical room.
Because of the negative pressure by the furnace.
Almost always,
Under the slab? or
Under the slab.
Under the slab.
Yep. almost always.
So that it's literally pulling, mining from farther away up to that space. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's based on a lot of observations. I mean, it's just like, but it's only in winter, you know, that you really get that. You turn the furnace on.
Did you ever test near like an open sump pit and find out it's not that high, maybe because it's being released already from the sump pit? Or,
No, that's not tested some pits. We just don't have them
oh, you don't have sump?
Where are you located at?
in Georgia. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we might, 1% of the houses maybe have a sump, maybe, not even.
You mean like a
Most
cat
of slab on grade,
No, basements.
they're basements.
But our drains are on the outside of the perimeter drains, at least the daylight. Now, we do have issues with those sometimes, because depending on how they are, and if it faces west and it's on a hillside, the wind blows against it. If you drill your hole through the foundation, you may find that your pressures are going crazy with wind, and it's like, okay, then maybe I need to put check valves on just to control pressures, but we don't have a whole lot of sumps.
Basements or on slab walls?
Basements,
Basements? And your furnaces are down in the basements or they're upstairs?
yes, no, maybe it depends. I mean, it depends on the house. I mean, depends on the housing stock. Most often, the furnace is gonna be in the basement, even if it's not
Basement,
servicing the
That's why you're
basement.
getting high readings at the furnace in the winter.
Right.
Now, is that, it's not a sub-slab return, it's just that it's,
Leaks.
the furnace itself is
Just,
sucking.
yeah,
in
the
this
furnace
un-
the furnace is pulling, what, 70 CFM or
These
whatever it is out of the basement,
These are heat pumps, right?
Mm. Furnaces,
Furnaces fired by gas.
fired by gas fired.
Okay.
So where I'm at, first floor, top floor, not as frequent to have heat pumps. They typically have furnaces. Heat pumps are generally only put in the basement because you just don't have the thermal load. Because you've got 3 sides of foundation wall and then 1 side walkout. And so there's just not the thermal load. You don't need that heat load. The heat pump will work just fine. I mean, it's not that there aren't heat pumps on other floors, but standard construction is that. The one that I found that's, well, not related to the sniffer, but it's when people have a zone damper system,
Right.
and the zone damper system doesn't have the barometric bypass on the supply to the return. So whenever they're calling for heating upstairs, not downstairs, but they're still pulling 16-inch return out of downstairs without any supply, it makes crazy pressure differentials. I mean, just crazy pressure differentials in the space. And that would be another one where it's being driven. When upstairs is on, even in cooling mode, I've got this big old heat return in the basement sucking air and none being put back. It always makes sense, right?
Yeah, they seem to put bigger returns in the basement than supplies all the time. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I have a guy who had a basement that was roughed out. They closed the return in the basement on his system, and he didn't have those around him. He finished his basement out and opened that return, and his levels went sky high. He's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "You opened the return in the basement that you had been closed off, and 16 inches."
And it's right next to the blower, so it's.
400 CFM, yeah, it's,
It's had the most vacuum right there.
16's 400, 800 CFM is pulling out of the basement. Whenever you're heating cooling upstairs, that's a lot. And so typically then, diagnostics, you test bottom of the two floors, typically you lose 50% of the floor when you've got the bypass damper system, and you don't have the bypass, but you have the zone damper system. I might be 4 in the basement, 3 or 3.5 on the first floor. Because you're sharing the air, you're mining from downstairs and dropping it upstairs. But they build houses differently where I'm at than other places, so. It took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
You see, he's got a radiant dial watch in there, it's like 1,200 picocuries inside that box.
Oh, no, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I kicked myself once because I could have bought a bunch of radiant dials. So they show some on eBay.
I was just in here.
Oh, it's just in here?
Yeah.